We can sit if you want. Okay. Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Gus, to accept our invitation here tonight. We're very touched to have you here at La Fémis with all this art and film students today.
Good to see you. Good to be here.
I have several questions to you tonight, but also we gonna give you the microphone to also ask some questions to Gus. My first question is about the origins of your work and your love of cinema. Where did your love for cinema come from? It was a childhood dream or something like that?
I think I think cinema was one of the only things to do actually when I was growing up. Today there's so many things to get involved in, but at the time, besides theatrical presentations, cinema was like a very big thing. And we had a teacher in my junior high school when I was 14, and he would show us experimental cinemas. He would show us Citizen Kane, Stan Brakhage, different.
At 14 years old.
At 14. And he also encouraged the students and a little bit myself, but some of the students were making 8mm films, animated sometimes for the English class. It was an English class, and it sort of made the art teacher jealous because the art teacher wasn't showing films, but the English teacher was showing films. But it was really kind of that period, and then I think I was personally a visual artist. And when I got to be like a little older, I started realizing that visual artists in New York City, I was living outside of New York City, the visual artists were shooting films, like Brakhage being a visual artist, or Vanderbeek or Warhol. I mean, Warhol being like a little bit later, but a lot of the visual artists were making films, and I started making 8mm films, sort of myself. And
you didn't make a film school; you make an art school. And I read that in that period you came to Europe and you went to Rome, and you met Pasolini. It was a big moment for you in that moment of when you're growing up like a filmmaker.
Yeah, I think it was just an opportunity that sort of happened by chance. I went to a school called Rhode Island School of Design in Providence, Rhode Island, and they have a sort of senior department in Rome for some reason. So seniors could go travel in Rome and see art in Rome and work, their last year in Rome. And because there was this sort of association, for some reason, my cinema teacher, who was named Marian Marzinski, a Polish filmmaker who had come to our school to teach, kind of barely speaking English, and he hooked up with Gideon Bachman, who was very famous. And you guys, if you've read a lot of Italian cinema, like interviews, Gideon is often the English-speaking guy in Rome. He lived in Rome, and he was close to all the filmmakers. So they hooked up to bring us, 8 or 9 or 10 students, to Rome to visit all of the filmmakers in 1975, when I had finished my school. And they were, everyone was shooting at that moment. Fellini was making Casanova. Lina Wertmuller was making Seven Beauties. Pasolini was finishing Salo. So it was like a really big year into, the sort of end, that period of Italian cinema. And we were going to the sets, or visited Pasolini in the dubbing room, and some of us visited him at his house, and went to lunch with him. And Fellini, we got to see him arguing with Donald Sutherland on the set of Casanova for an hour. Not arguing, but discussing the character. And it was kind of a great thing. the Pasolini, moment was, I think all of the moments visiting the filmmakers was amazing, but and now it's priceless, that opportunity.
And which directors of artists in general inspire you at that moment?
In 75? I was very impressed always with Fellini. Pasolini, I didn't really know as much about. I hadn't seen a lot of his films, so I wasn't really like up on Pasolini. I think that in America, I was had seen and was inspired by John Waters, because he was making films for like very, 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 very cheap with his friends, and just showed us like cinema students in Rhode Island that you could just go and you could do something that would show have a place to show.
And I have the feeling that with each film you try the experience of something new. Do you feel like an experimental filmmaker always, or?
Yeah, I think that's where I started. Was avant-garde. I think my my avant-garde cinematic journey brought me into can you actually emulate something that you saw coming out of Hollywood? So I was like emulating that as a maybe satirical statement, but I think I got more and more interested in making something that was dramatic, like a dramatic piece, and then that became the thing. But I think the origins were always like experimental. So Idaho was, I think, after making Malanoche. Did you guys see that? Yeah. So Malanoche was really the one that was made very inexpensively in Portland, and from a friend's autobiographical novelette that he had written, Walt Curtis. And after that, like I got a kind of job, and I had adapted Drugstore Cowboy. And so I got close enough to kind of, I think, independent cinema of that time. And I kind of was with this film, I was trying to kind of get rid of that and just write something on my own, something that I was just sitting down and writing. And I think I was putting everything I had into it. Like there's a little bit of George Eliot, Silas Marner in it. There's poetry. There's Samuel Beckett. There's Sam Shepard with the brother. There's all these elements just sort of thrown in like a collage. And it was also some of it was taken from other screenplays that I had written that were always set in Portland, Oregon. And I was, abbreviating them and putting them into this film, of which the Shakespearean part, there used to be a screenplay which was all Shakespeare. And I took part of that and threw it in. So it was like a collage. And in that sense, I think it was an more avant-garde piece, experimental piece. But then it also had, the story of Mike and Scott, which was a more dramatic aspect.
And it doesn't work at that time to become your second feature film. It was finally your first screenplay, but your Drugstore Cowboy was more successful with the producers.
No, actually, this was more successful with the film companies, because Drugstore Cowboy was made by Avenue Pictures, and they were kind of a small company. And I think in the making of it, for some reason, they were afraid of it. They had their money-making films, they felt, and the way they distributed Drugstore Cowboy was in art house cinemas it was just a weird way of distributing a film if you wanted to make money. So it was successful, Drugstore Cowboy, but it wasn't a particular money maker. But this one was New Line Pictures, which was a little bigger, and they did Nightmare on Elm Street as well as I think they did even Fellini films. They would release Fellini films. So that they were more prepared, and it was a better business producing, even though it was crazier.
And do you think today we can make a feature film with $20,000?
Yeah, I think even more, because even less money, because it's now, it just seems just with your phone, you can make something. Technically you can make something, and the rest is really like a novel. You have to apply yourself and write it and really organize ways to realize your ideas, which a lot of times involves people. So it would mean perhaps, that would cost money, maybe, unless you had donations of people's time to make something.
And in your creative process, when you realize the mood of your film, and when you write, when you visit the set or the location, you met an actor or something?
It's like ideas for films, I think, are coming really from just a momentary glance, of something, like a vision of something that really it opens up an interest where you can kind of like build on that particular like vision. If it's just, it could be somebody standing in a window, or it could be an event, a moment that you saw happen that is inspiring for like a kind of image that you can expand. And then I just keep studying that and layering that and adding to it and building it until it's, finished. And often the original concept and image isn't in the finished film. It's like sometimes goes away. In Idaho, I think it was always like the road and somebody on the road, which I had been on the road one time, hitchhiking, stuck on a road for days.
And you're a musician, painter, photographer. When you make a shot, it's like you make a painting, for example, for you?
I don't really think of it. It's like photography. It's not really like a painting. The road that has the face in it, there was always the problem of like finding a road that had a face, and then I realized, you had to, put a circle around it. But that was that was kind of like a painting. And some of the floating images, the barn crashing, are from paintings. But otherwise, I'm more like trying to represent like the action that you've created. Like you create, the scene in front of you, and then I'm using the camera to kind of like represent that creation in however I can. And sometimes the creation you're blocking it in a particular way. Sometimes the camera is like helping the blocking. It's different almost with every scene, but it's not. I don't really see it like a painting. I see the camera viewpoint as a non-bordered thing. It's almost like it's floating in space. There's not a hard edge like a picture, because it moves around and it changes so much that your attention isn't really about how the photography works with the edge of the frame, like a still photograph. It's it's like a lozenge, I guess, or like a TV set. But so I'm not really using it like a painter, I don't think.
But for example, the barn crash, the idea at the beginning was different than the final position in the editing room.
Yeah, I mean the original was,
and also there is a sort of barn in Drugstore Cowboy also. So it's an image that haunts
Those are
you
coming
or
from the
something?
same paintings. I was drawing like houses floating and crashing. This was something I was painting in school, and I painted, I was painting them all the time,
Why?
through it was sort of the place I arrived at as a painter. This was my sort of like thing that I always was painting, and I didn't really progress outside of that because I was like making films, I think. But it was probably in relation to my family moving around and having your house that you live in like destroyed. I always wondered myself like where the image comes from, but it represented like I guess the way I grew up.
But when you shot that particular image, it was you are trying to express an emotional feeling more than a narrative thing.
I think I was using that image, interpreting it as I had as a kind of violent thing that happens. But he was envisioning these things in the air. It was too expensive, I think, and too laborious for us to do all the things that I had planned. We had the barn crashing, but we never really had the barn floating in the air. And there were supposed to be other things that he sees when he's on the road. He sees them in the air. And then the barn crashes at the same time as he falls down in the road. And it was never linked to him having an orgasm in a room in Portland. It was more on the road. It was more stuff that was happening on the road that wasn't really completed properly because of just our abilities with special effects and the money that we had and the time that we had. And so I used it in a different way. Like in the editing room, I changed it.
Let's talk about actors. Each actor has his own method. And do you adapt your way to work with them with a method or a character of a human being at the end?
Yeah, I mean, speaking of actors, working with them, each actor has their own history and experience and their own like idea of what acting is. In the case of this film, like River really liked going off the page and making things up. Keanu didn't allow himself to do that. Like when he did it, he didn't like what happened, even though it was very brilliant. And I would tell him that it was brilliant. He wouldn't believe me, and he didn't like the idea of the actors improvising because I'm not sure why. Maybe his training or maybe his work in the past didn't include that. But River, I think, wasn't really allowed to do that. And it was a revelation of like, I can do whatever I want. And so he was making things up. And it was sometimes hard together with them because River was making things up and Keanu was trying not to make things up, which was very odd. But I think in general, like working with any given actor, you're trying to figure out what's sort of inspirational for them to get them to like get excited about what you're doing. And having, I really want usually the actor to help out, because that's usually the thing that makes them the most excited, as opposed to me, ordering them to do just this thing or just this line, and ordering them not to turn their head at a certain moment. I'm more like trying to let them go into their own universe, just as a way to like get them to give their best thing. And I've been working this year on a project where that kind of idea was just not allowed. Like going off the page was not an option. It was a series about Truman Capote, and it's you can still work, and the actors still can make things up without going off the page. It doesn't have to be verbal. But I'm usually always going that direction where I want the actor to to kind of get into it themselves. And sometimes that the actors just it's very foreign to them. They want to be told. So I can also just tell them what I would want them to do. But sometimes that's necessary. So it's almost, I heard one director talk about how, if he has to play classical music for one actor, he'll play classical music. If he has to play rock music for another actor, he plays rock music. He communicates with each actor differently, and I think I do that same thing.
And you allow to the actors to create at the same time.
I mean, that's just my own kind of desire, is to see how far they can go. And
you make it in Gary, for example. You make it. It was a film without screenplay at the beginning, and
that had no screenplay.
You wrote the film with the actors.
The actors and I were writing it together. There was no actual screenplay. There was a list of scenes that the actors had improvised, and I mean, it was a very interesting process. The actors had these long, involved improvisations, but when it came to actually shooting the film of Jerry, the actors were afraid of talking, and I sort of changed. I said, okay, well, if you don't want to talk, we're no longer making a John Cassavetes film. We're making a more austere thing, which became emulating. I started to emulate Bela Tarr's projects that had much more visual motion and less dialogue. And that was really coming from, me working with the actors, which was not necessarily a good thing. It was what we did, but I really had wanted them to improvise. They were just unwilling as co-creators, unwilling to do that. And maybe I needed to push them farther, but we made a different movie than I think we started out making.
And what happened with Champagne in Milk? I read once that he disappeared 2 months and create all the character. That's true?
He disappeared for a week, I think. He didn't disappear. He just sat in his condo and I think it was he needed to get into the character, so he needed to really just watch film footage of Harvey Milk, the character that he was playing, and immerse himself in the writings of the gay movement and sort of become the character, because he had put it off because he had all these other projects going. And so all of a sudden it was a week away from filming, so I think he had to go into hibernation and create the guy, and he started working. But Sean was an example of really just letting the actor do his thing. And in his case, that's perfect, because he doesn't really want to have the director telling him things to do. He wants to do it himself. So and that we worked together well on that.
What happened when you mixed different kind of actors, in Will Hunting, for example? You have 2 generations of actors and 2 methods also.
Will Hunting, with Robin Williams, or in particular, Robin Williams or Stellan Skarsgård, or
no, it's particular.
Well, Robin
Williams with in front of.
Well, Robin, I think Robin, he had done a lot of movies. I don't think he ever thought of himself as an actor, so he was nervous, and he wanted to do a lot of takes. He trusted me, fortunately, and Matt, on the other hand, Matt Damon, could just do one take, and he was fine with that. Robin was one more, boss, one more, because he was sort of obsessive, and he wanted to do a fast one, a funny one, a slow one, a sad one, a happy one. So I think for the editors, and I would say I'm the editor, so, but he always just was I think obsessing because he's obsessive, but also I think he felt, even though he had done many films, I think he felt a little out of place as a dramatic actor. and more at home as a comedian, than a dramatic actor. But he was fantastic. I mean,
you edit a lot of your own films, and how you make it, because you how can you find the good distance with the material when you edit by yourself?
I think it just, if I'm editing myself, it just takes a lot longer to feel it out. I often I'm editing, like in the case of Jerry or Last Days or Elephant. I'm editing it, but the takes were sometimes 5 minutes long. So you're sort of putting together pieces that are very large. If it's something that's more intensive and a lot of different angles, then I usually have help. I usually have an editor so that you can have the distance.
And you show your work in progress to friends, to other filmmakers?
Yeah, I try to show it at different times to different people or groups. Sometimes people that you don't know, and sometimes people that you can get help from.
What's your relation with the DOPs? You work with very different ones. How did you choose a DOP, for example?
I'm usually depending on, like, pretty much every time I've worked with a DP, which is all the films. We're starting from scratch. I'm like, setting up the shots. I'm usually entrusting them to like do the photography side, and a lot of times they're the ones lighting the scene. But then I'm usually like deciding this is where we're putting this shot and this, this other shot. So it's kind of like they're running the recording machine, and then I'm deciding what the shot is. So the real valuable, I guess the most valuable person I'd worked with was Harris Savitas, who just, we were trying different things. Like, I would say it would be great to make a movie with no lights because it takes so long to like put the lights up. And Harris would go like, yeah, I know, I always wanted to do that. So then we would do it. So Jerry, Last Days, and Elephant are all films made essentially with no lights, no lighting. You're like using the light that's there. And the technology of the film stock is able to capture it the way that you want it, without having to light, which is even more, available today with digital. I mean, digital photography is a lot more, at least now it's a lot, at the time that we were making those films, digital was just starting out, but now it's very malleable. But Harris and I I think we just thought alike, so we were like exciting each other with ideas. But hopefully that's happening with my DP. It doesn't always happen, but even if it isn't happening, we're getting the job done.
Sometimes we found Super 8 films in your movies, in Drugstore Cowboy, in Idaho, and other ones, like if you are shooting Paradise Lost or something like that. What's your relation with that kind of film stock and digital today?
Well, like Malinoche, Drugstore Cowboy, Idaho, the 8mm, they were actually 16 millimeter cameras. They were IMOs that they wound up. In each case, the actors are shooting the image. So we just give the actors the camera. Like in Malinoche, it's the kids, Johnny and Pepper, are their names in the film. They're just shooting it the way they would shoot it, without any instruction, including focus. They're just shooting it. With Drugstore Cowboy, it's James LeGros and Matt Dillon and Kelly Lynch are arranging their own shots and doing it. and those things where they're popping out behind the, like the bridge. It's like they're setting it up. It's like Hard Day's Night or something. But and then Idaho, it's River is shooting 16 millimeter. It looks like 8 millimeter because it's grainy, like a grainy stock, but it's like a home movie. So River was shooting in Idaho.
And today, what happened with digital and your way to make films? It's easier for you, or
I mean, I prefer it actually now, but it's still like the question of like what are you getting, what image are you getting, and you're able to see it sort of live while you're there. Where in cinema you needed to process it and see it the next day. So with digital, you're basically seeing it live on the set. Like what exactly happens if you change the light or change the angle. So it's the same process for me, really.
Also with the set, when you make a setup in a scene and you don't feel that you lost a kind of tension when you shot in digital rather than film.
Oh, like cinema has film has more tension.
Yeah.
Well, film runs out. So like if we run out of film, then you have to load the camera, so the tension can be like lost. Mm-hmm. I don't really notice too much difference. I feel sometimes the film camera is more independent because it doesn't have to plug into the wall. I mean, it's sort of, you can make it small enough that it's like by itself. Also, you can make a digital camera small as well. I don't really see too much difference. The way that if you're using a large crew, like a Hollywood crew, they tend to make it very complicated anyway. Like they'll have a lot of lights, a lot of camera supports, a lot of, things on the camera. So the camera becomes very big, whether it's digital or film. So to me, it's always the same, kind of the same problem.
And what is your relation with film music? You're a musician also, so
amateur musician.
And the music is very important in your films. They're always linked for you, music and film?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it's always been, what can be the great, like, sound. Sometimes, we discovered musique concrète, which was, a discipline that was coming from here, from Paris, as a way to, like, use a soundtrack that was musical and yet not made with instruments. It was made with sounds, but it was put together by composers. So there were musical compositions with no instruments, and so that became really interesting to me and my sound guy Leslie Schatz, who's done a lot of the films. And we had always tried to use a little bit of that, of musique concrète in Good Will Hunting, but we realized we needed more space in order to get a musique concrète composition to work. And it wasn't until we went through Jerry not really using those types of recordings, but Elephant was the time when we really realized, this musique concrète compositions that we've always loved are really, it's a place for them, and so we were laying them in almost always in all those scenes.
And when you decide to use a kind of music, for example, this very different Idaho music with a guitar player,
well, this one,
who's also a luthier, I think, no?
You mean the pedal steel player?
Yeah.
Yeah, he made his pedal steel. It's a very mechanical thing, but he played it and he also built it. So we found him in Portland. My idea on this one, this is the only time that I just said I'm gonna make the film and we're gonna bring musicians into a studio and record to the picture. and my editor was very against that. He was like, no, you hire a composer, and he composes music to go with the action. And I said, well, this time we're just gonna do it ourselves. So it was like homemade with violins and a musical saw and a pedal steel and some horns and whatever we decided to bring in. And it was kind of a homemade soundtrack, except for the song. Sometimes there's a song. So those are, yeah.
But it was a little bit improvised.
It was totally improvised. We were just using public domain songs and having Bill Stafford play to them, and then we would add voices, like maybe singing or musical saw. So it was very open. It wasn't trying to dramatically like force your emotions in a particular direction. It was way more open and free.
The other day we saw Gary here with the students, and I thought that you shot the actors like natural elements, like the wind, like the clouds, and I felt like it was a kind of documentary about death, something like that. Do you want to make a documentary film?
Well, I always wanted to make a documentary, but I've never done it.
So you make documentaries about actors?
Yeah, in a way. I think sometimes it's happening. It's partly happening like that, yeah.
Do you have some projects in your mind about documentary films?
No, not really. I've tried, but like it starts to become difficult. It's a very particular discipline I don't think I'm good at. I kind of want to like tell the story as opposed to like record a different story.
Des questions dans la salle? C'est maintenant ou jamais.
Hello. I got one question. I saw the picture, and I thought about three references. The first one was in style, the Fisher King Starry Gilliam, kind of this outcast aesthetic. Then also 90s movie Looking for Richard, Al Pacino, where this Shakespeare acting comes in. What I thought about Bob and the outcast and living there. And then the third reference I thought about is a book. It's Hermann Hesse, a German writer, Narziss and Goldmund, and he's writing about a relationship about two boys, which are kind of also these opposite poles, and the one searching for something in rather science and the other one in art, and this friendship being together but separate. And I just maybe a question if you know the book, if you read it, if you heard about it, and I don't know what my question actually is, maybe. But
I don't know the Hermann Hesse, that particular story. I know Siddhartha, which he wrote, but I don't know that particular story. Yeah, the Terry Gilliam Fisher King, we both brought our films to the Toronto Film Festival together. I hadn't seen his film in relation to my film, but I mean, there are some things that are in there, especially the Shakespearean kind of like character that Robin seems to be playing sometimes. And the other one that I don't know about that film, did you say Al Pacino?
It's Looking for Richard. Al Pacino and Richard III, also Shakespeare.
No,
it's
I haven't
end
seen
of the
that.
90s.
I mean, my Shakespeare was coming right from Orson Welles' Chimes at Midnight. I had seen that, and I was like, this looks like like kind of a modern day story to me. You know, I mean, that was where I was coming from, was that particular film.
Sorry.
I wanted to ask you about your writing process. Or you talked about making a collage for Idaho. It was also a very specific technique for Jerry. Are you always experimenting when you're writing your movies, or sometimes you use a more conventional method?
Yeah, if I'm writing, it's usually unconventional because I don't think that I'm a conventional. I don't think I have the ability to be a conventional writer. And I think every writer is specific. So, the developed writer, I think I'm not really a developed writer. A developed writer is also probably original as well, but I have done a lot of collaging, and visually, so I think that sometimes is like an influence from writers like William Burroughs that are like taking texts and mixing them together and cutting them up and placing them in different places and rewriting from those texts as a way to get, sort of into a magical space, I guess. I've sort of been a practitioner of that kind of writing and not, say, something maybe more traditional. I've tried, when I'm writing traditionally, it's a little less successful. But I've done projects. I guess my Drugstore Cowboy was pretty traditional, and I was going from another piece, a novel. So I was trying to keep the energy and the point of view of the original novel when I was adapting it. So it's a little less like my own thing. But if I'm left to my own devices, I'm usually doing something bizarre.
Thank you.
You never adapt a Bidnik novel. Why?
Like Kerouac, or
I don't know. Yeah, maybe because we were very close to.
I think Idaho is probably the closest thing to something like that.
But is it our original script?
This one.
Yeah.
This one's pretty original, except for the Shakespeare. It's as original as you could get, as I could get.
You never thought to adapt a novel from Kerouac, for example?
I worked on the Road, but in that case, I had a writer with me. But I did, have the idea to do it. It was actually Francis Coppola's idea. It was his novel. He owned the novel.
Right, yeah.
And so he had me and Barry Gifford working on it. And it just never came about. But at times, I've done worked with the beats. Burroughs was in Drugstore Cowboy, and he rewrote The Priest. He rewrote some of his own his pieces.
I was reading recently about François Truffaut's interviews, and in this one, he was telling about how when he was writing a script, there was always an anecdote coming to help him to continue writing. And does it happen to you? Are we seeing anecdotes from your life, and do you find it, and if yes, do you find it hard to navigate between life and art and filmmaking?
You mean anecdotes, meaning pieces of my life?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. It's coming from everything, from real things that happened to myself, real things that I've heard happening, other people telling me things that have happened to them, or things they've heard that have happened, or even, you know, in some of the cases, it's literally coming from George Eliot novel from the 1800s, this character that had narcolepsy. But I also had worked on a documentary about narcolepsy in Portland for public television. So, I mean, these things are all, it's all mixing together. I think for any writer, it's you're mixing everything that you know into like the soup of the new project, and trying to keep control of it.
Hello. I was just wondering, when you were doing the film Elephant, was it a way, like, because all your films are a bit satirical, a bit dark comedic all the time, I feel like, I mean, most of the time. But Elephant is so not like that. It's so direct, it's so harsh. So I was wondering, what was your mindset when you were doing the film, and did you, in a way, use the film as a way to cope with what was going on? Because it was like affecting you so much that you had to do something about it, and that was your way of presenting it to the world. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, the film's Last Days, which was about the death of Kurt Cobain, Elephant, which was based, you know, sort of inspired by the events of the Columbine massacre, and then Jerry, which is about two guys that get lost in the wilderness. All three of them were basically news items, things that had been in the paper. In the case of Jerry, it was just the local Boston paper. There was a mystery. Two guys went into the desert and one came back, and nobody really knew what happened. So there was like an area for interpretation, because there was no way to really get the story except for one voice, which was not necessarily, you know, able to tell the real story. It was a you know, a news item. Much larger was the first one was the Kurt Cobain death, and how many journalistic pieces there had been about what had happened. People wanted to know what happened, what was the history, what went wrong, and it was on the cover of like every magazine. And every magazine had 5 separate articles written by journalists.
I wasn't born, so. I wasn't born yet.
Right.
I don't remember, I mean, but I believe you.
But, and you also you don't have newspapers anymore. You don't have magazines.
That's true. That's also true.
In my case, it's same as if it was the internet, and if somebody died,
became viral.
The Smith bassist died yesterday, and it was in the papers. But anyway, it's the same, like, I think, situation where whatever era you live in, there was interpretations by journalists, but it was seen as like improper for it to have an interpretation of what happened by a filmmaker, because film was seen as an entertainment. So I thought there was a space for a film that addressed the issue of what happened to this person that had troubles, or what happened in Columbine, which continues to this day. So I was offering like a cinematic kind of investigation of sorts into it. And in each case there was like questions and unanswered questions that you could investigate.
Thank you for being here. I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned John Waters and underground cinema and how it influenced you as an art student, and then you talked about how film was replaced by a pneumatic camera and how it is more malleable because everyone has one today. So I wondered what you were thinking maybe about the nowadays underground scene, with a numeric camera, have we reached the intensity of what the underground scene with like 8mm, 16mm was in like the 70s or the 80s? Or do you think we're like just going not forward with it?
You mean the modern underground scene, or?
Yes.
I think that the filmmakers that were working with 16mm and 8mm were, yeah, they were using mediums that were available to them, and it was, even then it was like difficult to like find a camera and get the film and so forth. And now it's just become like if you were a novelist, it's become as easy as perhaps paper. There's no longer any struggle to have an image making machine in your pocket, and now you have it in your pocket. That now that, you know, if you have that, the next step is to like create something with it. And before it seemed like there was a little bit of a mountain to get together the facilities to make an image machine, but now it's a common thing. So it's almost like cinema has become as free as the written word.
But do you think we are? When I say we, I think like modern filmmakers, more younger filmmakers. Do you think people today are using this facility as an advantage, like people did in the 70s with like 8mm camera?
I mean, it's hard for me to. Yeah, I think so, for sure. You have to judge each piece like individually, but I think people are able to take advantage of it. It's this. I think the hardest part is, what are you actually focusing on, and what are you trying to make, and what are you trying to say? But like in a poem or in a short story, is the same problem. So that becomes still the problem as it was, in the 70s with independent cinema.
Thank you.
I had a question about one scene in My Own Private Idaho, the one in the desert when they are by the fire, and to me it's the most beautiful scene in the film, and I wanted to know how do you prepare yourself and the actors for a scene like this?
Did you read anything about it before, or?
The scene? No, I never. No.
Because it's sort of a famous scene, and I've talked a lot about it, and it had a weird kind of eventuality in the way we did it. But I think we had shot Idaho for a few weeks, maybe 4 weeks. It was only like a 6-week schedule. We were planning to go to Italy to shoot the Italian part. And there was the scene in the desert when they're around the campfire. That's always been sort of like a kind of amazing scene in the screenplay. But up until the moment in, say, like 3 or 4 weeks in, there were some very intense scenes that we got to that I feel River, he had the opinion that he hadn't really like given his like full stamp of his talents on those scenes. Some of the big scenes with his brother being one of the pinnacles of the story. And I think River was like sort of dissatisfied with the intensity of that particular shoot. And so he asked whether he could work on the campfire scene. If he could take that scene and he could write on, add some things writing wise with his friend Matt Ebert and with my assistant Scott Green, and he wanted to shoot it at the end of our shoot in Seattle when we went up to Seattle, and so it was kind of like the actor saying, "Can I rewrite the scene?" And I said, "Sure, like whatever you want, we'll do it. And if it doesn't work, we can just go back to the scene as it's written." So he said, "Okay," and he worked on it, and he showed it to me, and it looked great. And he said, "Okay, now I want to just shoot it with four angles, and from 4 different places, just one time each." Which to me sounded good because it's a time saver. Just one take from a wide angle, one take with a 2-shot, and one take with singles. And I said, sure. So we did that. I just did whatever he said, and he just made it work. He gave it his like sort of River Phoenix moment, which you see in a lot of his films. There's this like moment that he has in his films, which break your heart, and he's talented.
And I have another question about what you just said. Did you let another actor direct a scene after this?
Well, River wasn't really directing it. He was rewriting it. He was telling me how to shoot it. But still, I had to like be the director. And also I said, Keanu has to be okay with this. And he's like, oh, yeah, he's fine. Because they were super close friends. So Keanu was like, whatever you want to do. But no, I don't think... it depends on the involvement of the actors. Sometimes at the last project that I just worked on, my lead character, who was played by Tom Hollander, an actor in England, Tom was really good at, and really, just went into a scene knowing like the way you should block the scene. So he would start blocking the scene, and I would like, enjoy watching him block the scene, and usually it was the best thing, And so aside from that, I don't think I have had actors take over.
Never. Matt Damon and the Affleck brothers, they never proposed you some shot, for example?
No. I was around when they were writing the final versions of that, and aside from like, me being part of that process, when we shot Good Will Hunting, it was pretty much they wanted me to just be the director, and they wanted to be the actors, which was fortunate because it could have been messy. But no, I think so far, it's been pretty... it's been collaborative, but it doesn't get too out of control.
Hi.
Yes.
Hi, I just wanted to ask a question about Paranoid Park. What drew you to skateboarding world, and how did you approach it visually with Christopher Doyle, if I'm not mistaken?
There was a book in Portland written by a poet called Paranoid Park. And the skate culture, we had this kind of strong skate culture in Portland, and the skaters had built their own area to skate in under a bridge with their own money and with their own cement, and it was sort of a whole like destination for skaters internationally to come visit and see this like homemade skate park built illegally under the Burnside Bridge. And I was just basically adapting his book. Chris and I we'd worked on Psycho together, and since then we've done a long-form Gucci commercial together. He's one of the wildest characters. Has he ever been here, Chris Doyle? You should have him here. because he's amazing and you know, super like almost a Chinese man, but he's originally Australian. So kind of this interesting combination of people. And I mean, he's very professional at the same time as he's very free form. And Chris would often talk about characters that weren't even in the movie, like in a scene, almost like as a metaphor for what you wanted. So sometimes it could get really crazy, but it was amazing always working with him.
Many times we can see in your films that you're moving from different aesthetics of shots, like static or dolly track, to handheld camera in the same scene. And I would like to know how you think about this break into the style and inside the scene itself.
The cinematic styles. Yeah, I mean, I think like there's a style that exists in modern cinema which it really bothers me, which is the handheld style, which is kind of almost like every single film or TV show has been using this style, which I think was exciting at first and really was an invention, I think, of MTV in 1980 when MTV began to have a channel. The music videos of the time and the cinematic style of the time was almost like thrown into a blender. Like every styles were thrown into a blender to make music videos and to make things that were on their show. And so there was this style of like the VJ would be introducing the next video, but the camera would be going like this, like for seemingly like emulating, say, like D.A. Pennebaker or Richard Leacock or the documentarians of the 60s who weren't really holding their cameras like that, but sometimes they were running after people or the camera would shake, but there was this faux shake that all of a sudden appeared, which was like just keep the camera moving just to massage the audience or make it look like something's happening, like a faux reason, I guess. And then Oliver Stone used some of that style in his movie JFK, and it became like the main way that people everywhere, and mostly in Western culture, were making their films. And so now it's just ubiquitous. So I have used that style at times, but I kind of try to when I do use it, I try to think of the way the documentarians were using it and not kind of like a hyped up like pretend style. So there's that like little problem that I have with cinematic style, but I'm usually trying to do like the main thing that I'm generally trying to do is block the actors, to figure out where the actors in a given scene, if you have actors, if there are no actors, it's still there's something that's happening within the reality of what you're shooting to make whatever it is you're shooting have purpose and have the actors have purpose. Because I find that if visually the movement in front of the camera, forgetting for a moment the actual cinematic style, the thing that's going to be shot, if it is curated in the right way, it doesn't really matter where the camera is. The camera could be over here, over there. It could be faux if it wants to be. It could be anything, but the main energy is coming from the actual thing that you're shooting, not necessarily imposed from the camera. It's emulating. And the thing that really impresses me is that when you are just in the real world, there is always this like perfect motion that's happening around you, whether it's people or nature or clouds or people talking, voices, that it's always happening perfectly in front of you. And what is hard to do is emulate that perfection of just nature and natural movement. And that's what I'm usually trying to put into the scene in order to like falsely, like emulate reality,
Thank you. And how do you know Flia for the role in Idaho? Flia from Red Hot.
Flea.
Oh,
How
Flea?
do you know Flea?
Do I know him?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we're still
Where did
hang
you
out.
know him?
Well, he was cast in this film, in My Own Private Idaho. And he became very close with River, became a very close friend of his. And I just have known him through the years. We still play golf together.
Good evening, Mr. Van Sant. Thank you for the film. I feel like it's very fresh film, very modern in that time. Make a lot of thinking about the relationship we are. But I was always curious about Psycho. How you decide to make this remake, particularly this remake in this way, because I wrote that you make it millimetric with the original film. How comes this idea to reshoot the film, and what is the reason for you as filmmaker with a very extended career to make this particular film?
Yeah, it's a very weird film. I think at the time, let's see, that would be 1996. At the time, Good Will Hunting had come out, and it was just about to go into the Oscars. And so there was this idea that all the people that were nominated for an Oscar, the studios, all of a sudden, they want to know what your next project is, because they want to actually like start working on it. Because if you win the Oscar, and even if you don't, they can lean over to their friends and say, we have their next picture. That it's like a status symbol with the money people. So I was in this position of trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, because it was like a time where somebody was going to be able to finance it. And I kind of didn't like this situation. And there was one idea that I didn't really like, the way the studios were remaking everything by basically robbing the script and changing everything else, like changing the direction, changing the ending, because usually the endings were too sad. So they would remake films in the mid-90s. It's a common practice to do a remake. Still people are doing it. And they didn't really, they used the script, they used the integrity of the script and sometimes changed that, but they left out everyone else. They left out the director's work. And so I said, you guys should, I didn't like the whole process of doing a remake, but I said, you guys should try to just remake it for real instead of, making a fun ending at the end of a sad story, or change it. Just remake it. If it has value enough to be remade, really remake it and copy it. And they didn't like those ideas, but at that moment, just before the Oscars, I had the power to like get them to say yes. So they said, yes, of course, this is a brilliant idea. Even though for years I've been talking to them about this, now all of a sudden it was brilliant. And then I was forced to consider like whether I really wanted to do it, because it was almost like a conceptual art piece, because we were going to copy a film. And I decided we have to keep to the idea, because the whole idea is wrapped up in making a copy. And Danny Elfman, who was doing the score, said, well, you know, they'll kill you. The critics will kill you. And I said, yeah, but maybe that's part of the project. You know, like maybe that's not really the point. The point is what happens if you remake it. And so we went ahead and did it.
And the experience changed
they
something in you? The experience to make the film like in that way changed something in your way to...
No, I don't think we learned very much from copying it. We were really trying to like literally copy the motions and the timing and everything. I think the thing that I learned was that you can't really make a copy. Even if you really try, it's the originality is done over by somebody else. It's like it's not easy. I think you can do it. Maybe I'll try it again. But with too many different things, you know, like came up.
Thank you.
Speaking about weird concepts, I don't know if you heard about Jan Dillman from Chantal Ackerman, that this film won the award for being the best film ever made. Each decade, many critics and many people apparently gather to discuss about filmmaking. And yeah, I don't know if you've seen it, but if yes, or if you heard about it, what do you think of it? Do you feel close to this a bit of conceptual film also?
Yeah, Jean Dielman was when we were making Jerry, there was the filmmaker Béla Tarr that I was thinking we should try and like go in the direction that Tarkovsky and Béla Tarr had been working in Eastern Europe as a way to bring about Jerry, you know. And I couldn't get a copy of Béla's work, but I could get Jean Dielman. And I showed my cinematographer, Harris Savitas, Jean Dielman, as a way to kind of like explain what cinematically, what kind of like headspace you're in or the characters are also in. And I feel like in Jean Dielman, it's about many things, but it's dialogue, for one thing, is not really the thing that you're meant to pay attention to. It's like the dialogue is like similar to like the architecture. The dialogue is similar to the wallpaper. It's not necessarily the plot is not run by the dialogue. And you know, it was a huge influence. You know, I had seen it when it, you know, came out in I think 1972, and had done a talk with Todd Haynes about it in a magazine, Sight and Sound. Had been in a documentary about Chantal Ackerman, talking about the influence of Jean Dielman. And when we did Last Days, we were planning to have the camera float around the house in a way that we had done in Elephant, until the house became sort of difficult to float the camera around the house. And Harris suggested like we shoot more like Jean Dielman, where the camera is architecturally like at right angles to every piece of action. And yeah, it's like a huge influence. And
last question, maybe.
In both your films, Elephant and Last Days, you used Doors of Perception by Hildegard Westerkamp. And in both scenes, you shot the characters from their back. I think they're walking, and we can see them from the back. And my question is, how can we interpret the use of the same sound on both scenes, even if they're in two different movies? And how, when you were working on Last Days, were you thinking about using the same creation of Hildegard Westerkamp?
Yeah, Doors of Perception by Hildegard Westerkamp, which is like one of the greatest hits of like music concrete works. That had originally, I mean, my involvement with music concrete was really from a radio show in Portland, Oregon, which is sort of a city all by itself, like in the northwest of the United States. And there was a independent radio show where once a month, a guy named Richard Francis would play music concrete, and I'd never heard it before, and I was fascinated by what it was and how it was made, and because it sounded like sound recordings, which we were doing in cinema, like stereo sound recordings, mono sound recordings, sound effects, and so he later on, the closer I got to like sort of thinking about using that in cinema, we asked him for some of the recordings, and that was one of the recordings, Hildegard's Doors of Perception, and I think it just was something that I loved so much I used it twice, just because I loved it. When we made Elephant and Last Days, in both cases. In the first case, I had no idea that we would use music concrete within it. So it was just trial and error, just like while you're editing the film, while you're playing it, was adding different tracks to see how it affected the picture. So you have, which I'm sure all of you guys at making films, that's one of the things you're doing is you're juxtaposing sound, whether it's voice over, whether it's like more intellectual information by voice, or whether it's, a thunderstorm, or whether it's light rain, or like a background sound. Sound is like half of your strengths, So all of a sudden I discovered that it was perfect, like the long takes in Elephant. And it took me, like I'd gone through Jerry and not even thought of it, of using, like done a whole movie without forgetting that I could perhaps use something like music concrete within the traveling shots, but all of a sudden discovered this in Elephant, and just once again used it in that particular piece in Last Days.
Thank you.
To finish this conversation, I want to propose you a game. It's the Proust questionnaire. Maybe you know that. So it's 10
Proust's?
Yeah, quick questions and quick answers. What is your favorite virtue, Gus?
Quick virtue, patience.
And your favorite quality in a human being?
Patience.
Your favorite occupation?
Being a patient.
Is also your chief characteristic?
Patience.
Your main fault?
Patience.
Where would you like to live? Patient land.
I think France.
Really?
I think about it, yes.
If not yourself, who will you be?
If not myself? Not sure.
Your idea of misery?
Not sure.
And your idea of happiness?
I mean, I'm always like happy if I'm working on something. usually a film.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.